Hello, dear members of the Drama of Life family. Today we are going to bring you a romantic love story. So let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Julia Foster used to think she was the luckiest woman in the world. She lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs, had a successful husband, Andrew Foster, and a family that seemed like it couldn't be happier. Andrew was a famous architect, always busy with expensive projects, but he still tried to make time for his wife. Every morning, Julia woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and a gentle kiss on the forehead from her exemplary husband. Their life was as peaceful as a carefully framed classical painting without a single crack. Julia is a literature teacher at a local high school. She loves her job, she loves books, and especially she loves helping students find their voices through words. In her free time, she tends her small backyard garden, reads mystery novels, or prepares dinners that she knows Andrew loves. Her life is devoid of surprises, and Julia thinks that's a good thing. She is also very close to her family, especially her only brother Lucas. Unlike her quiet and calm sister, Lucas is lively, humorous, and always makes Julia laugh no matter how tired she is. They had a difficult childhood, losing their mother at a young age, so the relationship between the two sisters became even closer. Therefore, when Lucas announced that he was going to marry his longtime girlfriend Eliza, Julia was moved to tears of happiness. She prepared everything carefully: the dress, the wedding gift, the surprise speech for the wedding party. She was even the one who arranged most of the reception. As the big day approached, Julia became busier. She woke up early that morning, ironed her dress, prepared greeting cards, and displayed the family heirloom necklace that her mother had worn on her wedding day. She planned to give it to Eliza as a surprise. Andrew had left early, saying he had to stop by the company before accompanying her to the ceremony. Everything seemed perfect, until Julia's phone rang. It was an anonymous message. There was no sender's name, just a short line, but it felt like someone had thrown a bucket of cold water on Julia. "Don't go to your brother's wedding. Check your husband's warehouse." Julia's hands shook, her heart pounding. She looked around as if someone were watching her from behind the curtains. There was no one. The house was quiet, except for the birds in the backyard and the faint sunlight filtering through the curtains. Julia scrolled through the messages again, trying to parse each word. Was this a joke? A mistake? A threat? Why was she told not to go to the wedding? And why was she asked to check the warehouse? She had never doubted Andrew. The man was too thoughtful, too perfect, too proper. But her years as a literature teacher had taught her one thing: every story, no matter how smooth, could hide a dark chapter. Julia looked down at her iron gown. The wedding invitation on the table fluttered gently in the wind. Her eyes fell on her own wedding photo, she and Andrew smiling under a shower of white flowers. She had believed it was the beginning of a perfect life. But now an anonymous text message had fueled a simmering doubt. Should she ignore it and go to the wedding as planned? Or is there something really hiding in the house she calls home? A chill ran down Julia's spine as she glanced toward the door leading to the backyard, where the small gray shed still stood silently, a silent witness to secrets never revealed. Julia put the phone down on the table, still in shock. The message was only a few words, but it felt like a slap in the face to the perfect world she had believed in. She stared out into the backyard, where the small wooden shed sat like a stranger in the familiar garden. It had never bothered her. Andrew was usually the only one who used it. He said it held old blueprints, gardening tools, and other unimportant odds and ends. Julia had never had reason to suspect anything. She shook her head, chuckling to herself. "That doesn't make sense," she muttered, trying to quell the anxiety that was stirring inside her. Maybe someone sent it by mistake, or maybe it was a prank. She checked the messages again. No sender information, no indication of origin. She tried calling back, but it didn't connect. Anonymous. Indistinct. Julia opened her contacts and dialed Andrew. One ring, two, three, and then the phone went to voicemail. She tried again, a third time. The same familiar voice. "This is Andrew Foster. I can't take the call right now." "Where are you?" Julia whispered into the phone, feeling a sense of frustration rising in her chest. Andrew always picked up, especially on an important day like today. They had planned to go to the wedding together. He said he would be back by lunch, but it was almost 1 p.m., and there was still no message. No call, no sign of him. She paced the living room, twisting the corner of the tablecloth. The wedding photo was still on the shelf, Andrew's smile looking at her like a mockery. Could it be? She hesitated, her throat feeling dry. Julia decided to text Eliza, her brother's fiancée, to see if Lucas had arrived yet. She tried to play it cool, saying that Andrew wasn't home yet and that she might be a little late. Eliza responded with a smiley emoji and said that Lucas was excited to see his sister. The sweet message should have made Julia feel better. Instead, it only made her feel more lost. She didn't want to ruin Lucas's special day, but the strange feeling wouldn't go away, like an invisible string tightening around her chest, pulling her toward the mysterious warehouse. Julia stepped out into the backyard. The early afternoon sun shone on the lush green grass, but clouds still gathered inside her. A breeze blew, stirring her skirts. She looked back toward the barn. The wooden door was closed, the old lock intact. She had never kept the key. Andrew said only he needed it. Why is it locked all the time, she wondered, her feet involuntarily moving closer. Each step made her feel like she was entering an alien world. She went back into the house and searched the drawer where Andrew always kept his keys. There were 3 different key rings, all different shapes. Her hands shook as she tried each one. The 4th key, a small triangular one, finally fit the lock of the storage room. Her hand reached for the doorknob, but she flinched. Part of her wanted to open it right away. The other part didn't. What was waiting for her inside? Old cardboard boxes, or dusty blueprints, or something beyond return. She went back to the living room, hoping Andrew had called back. There were no missed calls. She checked her GPS app, but Andrew had turned off location sharing last week. He had said it was to save battery while he was on the road. The reasons seemed reasonable, but now each detail appeared like pieces of a puzzle. A phone that wouldn't answer, a locked warehouse, an anonymous text message, and a husband who seemed to be hiding something important. Although Julia initially thought it was a joke, her hunch grew stronger. Uncertainty rose like a tidal wave, swallowing all rationality in her mind. She stared at the warehouse door, and when the phone again showed unable to connect with Andrew Foster, Julia knew. She couldn't sit still. Julia stood in the living room, her heart a mixture of urgency and fear. She turned back to look at the barn again, her eyes now filled with disbelief. The sounds in the house were muffled, the silence eerily quiet. Everything seemed more confusing than ever. How could she continue her day without facing this? She took a deep breath. Okay, I'll check, Julia told herself, trying to calm herself. She went back to the bedroom, searching for the spare key. The one she'd forgotten existed in a small drawer, under the old papers Andrew always said he'd sort through. When the cabinet door opened, Julia found the key she was looking for. It was in a small box that looked as if it had never been used. A cold feeling ran through her hand as she touched the metal, like she was holding a ticket to a secret she did not want to know. Her heart pounded. She hesitated, looking out the window at the backyard. It was the same shed. Nothing had changed. She wondered if she was doing the right thing. But before she could think any further, her feet were out in the hallway. There is nothing I cannot face, she told herself, as if by encouragement. Julia took one step at a time toward the warehouse, the door before her eyes still the same, solid and silent. With a strong gesture, Julia inserted the key into the lock and turned it gently. There was a click, and the warehouse door slowly opened. A light breeze blew in, carrying the scent of earth and old wood. The familiarity of this space made Julia feel as if a part of her was finding peace again. But as soon as she stepped inside, everything changed abruptly. The door closed behind her, and the darkness of the warehouse immediately enveloped her. Julia had to pause for a moment to let her eyes adjust to the dim light from the dim neon light on the ceiling. There was nothing strange inside. A few old cardboard boxes, gardening tools, and a few nondescript objects. But the strange feeling, the foreboding, touched her again. She began to walk deeper inside. Each step she took seemed light, but her heart felt heavy. Suddenly her eyes stopped at a hidden corner, where there was a large box that was carelessly covered. Julia stepped closer, her heart starting to beat faster. She didn't know why, but she had the feeling that she was doing something wrong. This box was different from the others in the warehouse. It was wrapped in a black cloth, which looked like it was being deliberately hidden. She was startled and stepped back. But then her curiosity got the better of her. Her hands were shaking as she opened the cloth. As the fabric was pulled from the box, a sense of dread washed over her. Inside were familiar yet out-of-place items. A leather wallet, red heels, a bottle of expensive perfume, and a black handbag. Everything was opulent, like the accessories Isabel, her younger brother Nathan's fiancée, used. A feeling of confusion came over Julia. She realized that these items were too familiar. Isabel had always liked expensive things like this. The red leather purse was one of the birthday gifts that she had shown everyone at the end of last year. The high heels were always worn by Isabel to parties. And this perfume, she remembered the scent lingering on her wrist when Isabel hugged her goodbye before leaving. She stood frozen, her hand still on her bag. The choking sensation made Julia want to throw up. How had Isabel's things ended up in Andrew's warehouse? Her lips pressed together, her eyes began to sting. Pieces of the story began to fill in, forming a dark picture that she never wanted to see. She couldn't understand, couldn't explain. At this moment, everything was like a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. She quickly stopped, took a deep breath, and tried to calm herself. It can't be. It can't be, Julia told herself, but her words couldn't soothe the fear growing inside her. Julia could no longer stand still. Her mind was in turmoil and her unease only grew. She decided to open the box again, hoping to find a logical explanation. But as she pulled back another layer of fabric, someone's voice echoed, soft but binding in her mind. Julia took a step back, her hands still frozen in terror. The warehouse was no longer the junkyard she had thought it was. It was a pit that had buried everything she believed in. A single question echoed in her mind. Why Isabel? And why Andrew? She didn't dare breathe. The room seemed to close in around her, so suffocating that every breath was a struggle. She bent down again, groping for those familiar objects, touching each one as if to verify that this was real and not an illusion. The handbag, it was Isabel's favorite. The wallet still had the cute little sticker that Julia remembered Isabel putting on it as a personal touch. The perfume, the haunting scent still lingered when she opened it. And the heels, the ones Isabel had worn to her own engagement party with Nathan. Julia's heart felt like it was being squeezed. She crouched down, took out her phone, and flipped through old photos, trying to find a trace of these items with Isabel. In one of the spring party photos, Isabel was standing next to Nathan, smiling brightly, and yes, she was wearing those red shoes. Julia zoomed in on the photo, her eyes welling up as she examined the details. Undeniable. Her mind was torn between disgust and confusion. Isabel, the person she had thought of as a future sister, as family, and Andrew, the man she loved, the man she trusted, the man who held her every night and said, "I love you forever." Forever, Julia whispered, tears welling up uncontrollably. As she was about to pack everything, her eyes fell upon a thick stack of papers tied with a small rope, tucked deep in the corner of the box. Julia pulled it out with trembling hands. It was a stack of letters, but not letters from a close sister. Each word was soaked with emotion beyond the ordinary. She began to read, "Darling, I can't wait to be free to be with you. I hate having to act like a naive bride in front of Nathan. But don't worry, this wedding is just a cover. I just need a little time, then I will be yours. Forever." Julia clutched the letter tightly, her hands starting to shake uncontrollably. She felt like every piece of her life was being torn apart inside her. She turned to the second picture. "You said you wouldn't let anyone come between us, not even Julia. I trust you. She won't suspect a thing. Marrying Nathan is just a stepping stone to escape the controlling life. After that, you and I will leave here, live a life that no one can forbid." She no longer felt cold, nor pain, only emptiness. It was as if someone had dug a hole in her chest and sucked everything out. Love, trust, loyalty, family, all betrayed in a vile game in which she was the last to know. Her hand slid down the stack of letters, finding another large sealed envelope. Julia opened it, and inside was a stack of printed paper, copies of messages between Andrew and Isabel. Her eyes quickly scanned over each dialogue. Andrew, don't let Julia suspect anything. She's very sensitive. Just pretend to love Nathan like normal. Isabel, how long until I'm yours? Andrew, just get married and gain my trust. Then I will arrange it. Julia will never know. She clenched her hands, the pages beginning to wrinkle in her trembling grip. Julia couldn't understand the man she had lived with for so many years. Andrew, he had held her hand in the hospital when her mother died. He had stayed up all night worrying about her when she was seriously ill. She had thought no one loved her like he did. But now all the memories were lies, fake and dirty. And Isabel, the girl who used to call her dear sister-in-law. They used to plan trips together, choose wedding dresses together, talk about the future together. But it was all just an act. Julia almost fell to her knees when she saw the photos falling from the bottom of the box. Color photos, clear and crisp, undeniable. Andrew and Isabel, traveling together. They were sitting on the beach, smiling, holding hands. Another was of them kissing in a hotel room. The photos were unmistakable, unfalsifiable. This is not a misunderstanding. This is betrayal. Julia left the warehouse like a lost soul. Every step she took was another stab of her heart. Her mind was filled with nothing but a pounding of emotions. Anger, pain, and indescribable disappointment. The phone in her pocket buzzed. It was her mother. She asked why Julia hadn't arrived at the church yet. The wedding was about to start. Her voice was cheerful, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit their family. Julia tried to keep her voice calm, saying she needed some time to get ready and would come later. She hung up before her mother could notice anything was wrong. She walked straight to the car, but didn't turn toward the church. Her heart led her to a small coffee shop nearby, a place she knew Nathan often went to before big events, as a quiet place to calm his mind. Luckily, Nathan was there. He sat alone, dressed in a neat black suit, holding an unfinished espresso. When he saw his sister, he smiled slightly. "Do you need some peace before being a bridesmaid too?" Julia said nothing. She pulled up a chair and sat across from him, her face so tense that Nathan frowned immediately. "What's the matter, sister?" Julia set the bag on the table and took out the photos, the letters, and the printed messages, all the evidence she had gathered. Her hands were cold as she pushed them toward her brother. "I need to know this before it's too late, Nathan," she said, her voice hoarse. "I can't marry someone who's cheating on me." Nathan looked at her, confused, then slowly bent down to look at the first photos. His eyes widened. He flipped through each page, each message, each handwriting. His expression went from confusion to shock, to anger, and finally to devastation. "No, it can't be. This is Isabel and Andrew?" Nathan's voice cracked. "My brother-in-law," Julia nodded, trying to keep her composure, "and my fiancée." Nathan stood up, taking a few steps back as if everything around him was collapsing. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands clenched until they were white. They planned this behind my back. They used me as an excuse. What about you? What about you?" he asked, his voice trembling. Julia stepped forward and hugged her brother. "I was betrayed too, Nathan, but I can't let you continue living a lie like I did." A long silence fell over the two sisters, broken only by Nathan's ragged breathing. After a moment he nodded, a heavy nod, as if he had just given up on a dream. "I won't let them fool me another minute," Nathan said, his eyes flashing with determination. "I'm calling off this wedding, now." At the church, everything was ready. The pews were filled with guests. Soft music was playing. Isabel, in her white wedding dress, stepped out of the dressing room, a smile on her face as if the world revolved around her. But a few minutes later, Nathan stepped onto the stage, his face stony. He asked for the music to stop. All eyes turned to him, including Isabel, whose face had changed color. "I apologize to everyone for the inconvenience," Nathan said, his voice firm. "But this wedding will not take place. The man I was planning to marry has betrayed me." Isabel's eyes widened, her lip trembling. "Nathan, what are you talking about? Who told you that?" Nathan pointed at Julia, who was now entering the cathedral, holding the evidence in her hand. "My sister showed me the truth, and I believe her." Isabel started to argue, but Nathan had already turned away. The guests stirred. Their mother was stunned. Julia just stood there, her eyes fixed on Isabel, no longer angry but with quiet contempt. Late in the afternoon, when the church was almost empty, Andrew appeared, breathless, his face full of concern. He had heard about the incident but had no idea what it was. When he saw Julia standing alone in the parking lot, he rushed over. "Julia, what's going on? Why did Nathan call off the engagement? What did you tell him?" Julia turned back, facing the man she once loved. There was no longer any weakness in his eyes. "I didn't say anything, Andrew. I just gave Nathan the truth, the thing you and Isabel tried to hide." Andrew paled. You, you don't understand. I have my reasons." "Reason?" Julia interrupted. "What reason could possibly justify you betraying me, betraying my brother, and turning everyone into puppets in your dirty play?" He looked at her, for the first time speechless. Julia took a deep breath, stepped closer to him, eyes unblinking. "Whatever you do, but from now on I am no longer afraid. I have lost so much, but at least today I stood up. For Nathan, for myself.